Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this month's episode. We have the distinct honor today to talk to a president of a university and college in Omaha, Nebraska. Her name is Dr. Andreia Nebel. Andreia is a PT, a physical therapist by profession. She's an actual practitioner who worked her way into the collegiate arena and academics. She's an academician now, and she's worked at the VP level within the institution for quite some time, and recently ascended to the president of the university's faculty and staff and the overall hierarchy of the organization. We asked Andreia to come today because of the uniqueness of her situation. She's at a school in Omaha where she has spent pretty much her entire career matriculating through the different ranks to get to where she is today. She recently, when she assumed the position of president, she brought in a brand new organizational design based upon her understanding of how the university should operate. In doing so, she brought up all of her VPs into the position, and they are now in the process, about 8 months into the process now, of organizing their team, figuring out their operational design, and then aligning their organizational design in such a way that she brings unique perspective to what it is that she does. And so without further ado, Dr. Nebel, I just wanted to say thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Good. Thank you very much, Chris, for having me. I'm excited to visit with you this morning and appreciate the opportunity.
Well, let's just jump right into it, okay? Because you and I get a chance to work together on occasion, and it's a lot of fun to see your team forming. Give us some of the highlights. What are some of the big things that stick out in the last 10 months that either surprised you or caught you off guard or were exactly the way they thought they would be?
Well, I think that the main thing that I noticed in higher education in general, we're trying to redevelop, I would say, trust in the higher education field overall. And so I was not surprised by the fact that we really needed to spend more time in doing more higher education directed practices so that we were very clear of what our goals are and what direction we were going, what's coming back to kind of that mission oriented value system, and then moving forward into what are we going to strategically be able to accomplish here over the next few years. And that didn't surprise me that we needed to rebuild that trust. What surprised me was that how ready people were to start to do that work. So we talk a lot about irreversible momentum here. And so we had really good momentum because now we had stability for Clarkson College, and so people were really ready to go. So I was really humbled by the fact that they wanted a direction, and now we can take that direction.
That's awesome. I like how you start with your people first. So, and I didn't let you go there on purpose. So tell us a little bit about Clarkson College, and then let's talk about this team that was so ready to go when you appointed them.
So Clarkson College is a private nonprofit institution, all in health sciences here in Omaha, Nebraska. We primarily have nursing fields from associates to doctoral professions, but then we also have a large allied health programming and healthcare business programming in radiography and medical imaging, physical therapist assistants, community health, all your pre-med, pre-dentistry, pre-physical therapy, all those fields as well, along with psychology and then, of course, general studies. We do have an EDD program as well here in interprofessional leadership and in healthcare education. And so we, again, focus with 1,100 students across 25 different states pretty consistently. About 50% of our programming is completely online. And then we also serve another 5,700 community members in fields that they just need to continue their healthcare professional credentials, or they're wanting to do entry-level positions, which are needed so much across the healthcare space. So phlebotomy and medical assisting and CPR and nurse aides and those kind of things. So we're small but mighty. We have a long history of being an institution established from the Episcopal Diocese, actually, in 1888. And as far as we can tell, our historians are saying we're the first nursing program this side of the Mississippi, west of the Mississippi.
Very good. Now, One would assume, based upon what you just told us, as a physical therapist is your degree. How did you attain your doctorate degree, and why did you go the route you went?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I was uh, a student. My mom never went to college, and so but education was important, and my dad and mom both supported that very much. And so when I went to college, I knew I wanted to be in a field where I could maybe make a difference or potentially, um, help in some way. And so I just started taking a bunch of classes and really didn't have a direction. And so I had a really, really good advisor. And so I think that, I guess, along my whole trajectory, mentorship is important. And I still seek mentorship with you and other people that I've had throughout my life. But the I really had an advisor that sat down and said, you have all these credits, you're going to graduate school. And so for me, preventative medicine was important. And so when I was applying to physical therapy school, I felt that was going to be the best way I could do more preventative medicine and preventative care. And so that's how I ended up in physical therapy. So I've actually never personally seen a physical therapist or a physical therapist assistant myself, but I definitely enjoyed being able to help. And when I came out of school, I was in pediatrics, primarily developmentally delayed adults, and neurology was the focus that I had, and as well as long-term care facilities, because I really like the geriatric population as well. So that's been my physical therapy realm, but it really turned into advocacy pretty fast. And I wanted to be really a fifth grade teacher when I started out. And so in 2003, I had the opportunity to begin working at Clarkson College. And so teaching college students is not quite like teaching fifth graders. However, I have very much enjoyed being a faculty member and being able to make a difference, not only in the physical therapy field, but then now through Clarkson College, all of the academic health science programs we have.
Yeah, but at some seminal point in that journey, you suddenly said, I need to get a doctoral degree, or I want
Oh, yeah.
to get a doctoral degree. And you didn't get one as a PT or any
I
sort of.
did. Yeah, no, I did as a PT. So actually
Okay.
what I did do is you said doctorate degree, the difference I made was that at the time that I was applying to physical therapy school, there was only 5 DPT programs in the country. And so for me, I was really thinking, well, what's one extra year and some extra, residency hours. And so that's how I ended up at Creighton University for my first doctorate, and then went back for a
Uh-huh.
second in leadership.
So key here, lifelong learning.
Yep.
So for your first doctorate, then what was the motivation? Why would anybody go for a second terminal degree? And the
That,
degree you picked.
well, my family would probably ask that same question, especially my husband, who said, let's pay the first doctorate off before we go get the second doctorate. Well, really, a clinical doctorate for me was different and was the focus on being a good practitioner. And so the EDD, the doctorate in education, provided more of that. I needed that leadership component. I wanted to do more around the scholarship of an applied research project. I wanted to know what it was like to go through a dissertation process. I know most people would say that's the crazy part of it, but I really do enjoy taking classes. And I knew I needed to have more expertise and more knowledge in leadership practices directly, as well as just organizational structures, organizational change, and development.
What a tremendous example to set for your two children who are both in college now, if I understand
Yep.
right. Okay. And your husband supports all this, 25 years. I mean, is he going to let you do any more? Or are you just going to be
But
the president for
uh, well, it's funny that you say that, because now he doesn't even really ask. I sign up for different pro sci courses and organizational courses and certificates, and now he just sees that. I always tell him, I'm like, you enjoy spending time and money and energy, on golf or trips or being out in the mountains or wherever you're at, and I enjoy signing up for courses. So
Very good.
that's my hobby.
A great hobby. All right. So here we are. We kind of know what the journey you've been on, which is very admirable in terms of continuing your education, continuing to develop. I like it one time, I think you said, you don't know what you don't know. So you always have to seek it out and try to figure it out. And so all of a sudden now at that kind of journey, you're the president of this entire institution. I mean, everything out your window we can all see, to include the snow today in Omaha. we can see is your vast empire of control and span of control. How did you organize a team to go after that? Did you just have a team in place you fell in on, or did you create one?
I created a team. So our structure was, I really focused on best practices for higher education. And so even though we are not a large university system, there's basic tenets that I knew were important when we're going to develop a team. And so we focused those around, of course, your finances, your academic affairs, but knew that we needed to spend more time in our enrollment and retention efforts, communications and development, as well as your administrative services, and then made sure that Clarkson College moving forward is always going to have an arm in the organization that was focused around community programming and innovation, because we serve, like I said, over those 5,500 community members, and also do innovative practice right now. We're the only college with 3D printing and training services. And so I knew that we needed to, whoever was in these roles, because we all be gone tomorrow, is whoever's in these roles is really thinking about how are we going to stay directed in these 6 areas. And because I've been at Clarkson College for over 20 years now, it was important to me, and we're, a small university, about 150 FTEs. It was important for me that we were developing from within, and that we were going to take that model from the beginning of making sure that if people were qualified and they had done that work and they were focusing in on wanting those leadership roles, but we were going to do that internally. And so I hired 6 new VPs. The structure we had before was 2 VP structure. So it was myself and a colleague. And even though, I guess in her role, she interviewed for a new position. And so we really took the focus that we were going to open this up internally. We had multiple candidates interview for all the positions. And I think that spoke to me that people were interested in saying, yes, I want to lead in this area, and I'll do it from Clarkson College. I have the experience, I have the expertise to do it. And so we ended up, happy Women's International Day, by the way, but we did end up with our entire executive leadership team is all women.
Very interesting dynamic too. I'll tell you, a
Mhm.
strong team. I have the opportunity to work with you guys on occasion, and it's always fun because it's in the Army, you used to have a saying about Army students, they sit on the edge of their chair and they're always very eager to learn. You don't see that very often in my new roles, but I do see it at your school. So within that group of counting you, 7 women, all on your leadership team, tell me, what have been the greatest strengths, challenges that you've seen, not from the female perspective, but from the internal migration of people who are already in your organization becoming leaders in the organization? What are the challenges? What are the strengths of that, as opposed to bringing people from the outside?
Yeah. So when you do internal and they move, then that peer to supervisor role is difficult. And
Yeah.
so again, we're already starting, I would say, kind of back from the bottom of the pyramid. I use Laconi's pyramid quite a bit of you're building that trust. So they have to rebuild that trust. Even though they've been colleagues for a long time, you do have to move from being the peer to then being the supervisor, being the leader. They have to have direction. You have to have and everything can't be on consensus. And so that can be a struggle, is that decisions have to be made, and people in the leadership roles that they now have to be willing to make those decisions and be clear on those decisions. Some of the decisions have to be very direct, and some, of course, we want input, because I do believe people commit to what they help create, for sure. But that's a struggle to go from peer to supervisor. I even noticed it from going from the academic affairs role to the president role, been here a long time. And sure enough, if it within just really a few weeks, you're seen as somebody different on campus, where I might not see myself being that different of a person, but you definitely carry a different, I guess, different capabilities, if you will, or you have different areas that you're gonna have to be responsible for. I would say responsibility is a better word for that. And so the struggles for some are, we have to, imposter syndrome kicks in a little bit.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you really have to go back to that. We go back to that Laconia model of you building trust, you're building teams, you're opening and making sure we're being good listeners, but you have to be willing to have conflict, make sure people are heard. And conflict is a word that some people shy away from, but here you have to be able to know that people are going to be willing to speak up when they have something to say. That you have to have accountability, which is that third tier of that, and then that builds more of the commitment, and then you're going to get the results you want. Otherwise, it's just going to be we're friendly, we're a family at Clarkson College, but what I'll say with that, otherwise it just ends up everybody not wanting to hurt anybody's feelings, and I was your colleague before, I don't want you to see me as your supervisor. And even for our leaders that were our directors that went up in positions from faculty positions to director positions, they're having to navigate the same thing. So that's the hard part, I think, in leadership when you do it internally, is they're moving from a role they had in the past where they were comfortable and they were obviously seen as somebody who had a lot of capabilities. They took the chance to apply and do something different and we see something in them and they saw something in themselves. But then you have to make that change, that the relationships are different. They're important, and you have to navigate them in a different way.
When you took the initiative on that one, did you anticipate that challenge? Because it appears on the outside that you did, because you invested in your people very early and understanding that that was going to be a challenge. Did you do that by design or out of need?
I did it out of design, of that we would focus first on supporting and developing our college internally. And even this year, we've started an emerging leaders program for people that are not in director or VP roles. And we're a pretty flat organization anyway. But what I would say I definitely was caught off guard by was the fact that it was more difficult than I anticipated it would be, because there was hesitancy in the people that have taken on those new roles.
Right, right.
And there was a whole new direction, because now we have a new leadership council as well. And so, as I say every day, no, not every day, about every other week though, on our campus is very much our administration at Clarkson College is leadership council. Our directors, our VPs, myself, the leadership at Clarkson College is not Andrea and a few other people.
Okay. Well, and that's, what I think my observation for you first is to compliment you that you decided to use that internal development design. It would have been difficult, and you'd probably still have a very steep learning curve going on in terms of pros and cons with outsiders coming in. But what you did, and hopefully the audience picked up on this, is because of your experience internal to the organization, you could see operation, how the operation should be run as opposed to how it was being organized.
Right.
And so you took the radical initiative that when you walked in, you just basically said, these two positions are inadequate for the operations that we have today. They may have been perfect 10, 15, 20 years ago,
Right.
but the operational design way outpaced the organizational design. So you just said, scrape the whole top off, create a new organization, and then fleet up individuals in such a manner that you felt that's how the operation should go in the future. So I think your risk assessment on that was exceptional. And I also think that the way you mitigated that risk by investing in those 6 VPs and yourself to get through that process. And so hats off to you on that. The other thing I thought was interesting, you said, you suddenly fleet up and now everybody's looking at you. And so you have all kinds of new responsibility. And one of that is the persona that you have to present yourself, that you are in fact capable of assuming that role. And you and I have talked about, the idea that there's a requisite level of theatrics associated in being the leader. Okay. You have to assume the role that people want you to assume, but also be able to be empathetic enough to assume an aspect of the role that people don't expect. And that is going back to your desire to invest in your people.
Right.
I think, Simon Sinek, and we've talked about him many times in his approach, which is if you get the people right, then the business or the university or the college it'll take care of itself. And then all you have to do is kind of make sure they have the resources they need and the guidance they need. And that way you can sit up in that room and you can look way in the future and think about important stuff
Right.
and be able to react to opportunities and challenge. So interesting dynamic. Talk about the process. What kinds of things have you gone through with them, from individual counseling to mentoring, and any other individuals from your past or others that are asymmetric mentors that you've used to help you through that process, if you don't mind sharing?
No, absolutely. And you know, I guess reflecting on the process in general, um, there is so much about having a common language. So we spend a lot of time in making sure that we have a common language, um, sharing the why and sharing that over and over and over again. And then also making sure that we have spent the time to say, okay, what are the skills that people need? How do we teach? What are our plans? Some of it is just the organizational part of making sure we have clear timelines, clear language, clear goals. And we know that from kind of leadership 101, right? When people have a shared goal and there's a vision, then we can move forward from there. And you've been really helpful for us too, of like clarifying that vision and making sure people can describe and understand and assess what's going on. And so I think that the process that we've been going through is really around making, we've committed to coaching experiences for our teams. So our leadership council and our executive teams, our faculty and staff have an opportunity to participate in emerging programs. And so I think that there's always the opportunity for self-awareness and reflection. And then when you can have that coach, that one-on-one coach outside of the organization, is really very helpful. And so we've set that up so that our leadership council has access to those type of resources, as well as making sure that we bring in individuals who can speak to our councils or speak to our campus. As you know, you and others have come and presented to be able to talk about topics that are not just focused on the industry, but focused on how are we going to help understand each other better, play to people's strengths, and not play in a political way that we're trying to manipulate a situation, but really making sure that if there's a lot of great ideas out there, and if we listen to them and we know who the people are, then their strengths are going to be, that's going to be more, motivation for them to do the work that they do every day as well. And so I would say over communication is probably one of the number one things that we're spending time in, and then having clear processes and procedures, why you're doing what you're doing.
Explain to our audience what you mean by over communication. Is there a risk associated with that now that you're the boss?
So far, no, because it takes, as we know, people learn in a lot of different ways. And so when you're communicating, it has to be that verbal communication for sure. And it starts with the why, and it's some ideas, always clear parameters around it, and always some historical background to help our teams, I know. But then it's emails, and then it's in written forms, and then we might have a visual, and then it will be brought back up again a few months later. But what that helps with too is people see then progress. And so I've really been focused on, actions speak louder than words. And it's an old saying, but it's true. And so when you're over communicating, actually, then people can see the action behind the communication. So I think that from my experience, there's been more risk in not having communication, because then people will make up their own stories of what they think is happening, or who said what. And then and then that actually causes more damage, really, to just the morale and to then the message and the truth of what's happening. I always say truth is not hard to keep track of. And so if you're continually communicating, then people know what's actually going on.
And so you're very good at doing that with your internal stakeholders.
Mhm.
And I think what a lot of new leaders don't understand is that the most primary stakeholder you have is your workforce,
Yep.
and your employees and your team. They're stakeholders, and so the
Mhm.
transparency that you're sharing is huge, because if there comes across at any moment there's a lack of transparency and you're holding back, and you're absolutely right, that's when things start to break apart. What other stakeholders do you have out there now that you're the president that have either surprised you or or started to make you think, do I have enough time to do all of this?
through this. Well, not as a surprise, but definitely we're student centered. We share that across Clarkson College. So our biggest stakeholder, of course, are our students and the consumers that we have that come outside for non-degree seeking pieces. They're definitely important constituents. The constituents that spending more time with, that I would say is not maybe a surprise either, but our community, we've always been very service oriented, but do you have enough time for all the community efforts that you want to be able to do? And so definitely having to be more strategic of focusing in, because I don't want to just be a flash in a pan somewhere and we show up one time, but truly building relationships. And so the community piece, the community is a constituent for us. Of course, our alumni, as you already said, our employees, our board of directors, we're a hospital affiliated college, so it's important for us to be connected, as well to our hospital administrators and all of the different programming that they have. So those are the top ones I think of. But the community is the one that's the hardest for me, because I want to say yes to everything, and then having to find how you make sure and do it well and be authentic about it as well.
What about, have you found that you have stakeholders maybe in local, state government and
Oh, definitely,
possibly
yeah.
the media? Talk about that.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. We spend a lot of time with our, Nebraska Hospital Association, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Labor. We actually just received for our online nursing program, the veterans recognition. And so you have, of course, military and I would say to our public school districts. And so we definitely have lots of Department of Education. I mean, there is no shortage, as you are well aware of from your life too, that federal regulations and, accreditation regulations that we have. And so they're definitely huge stakeholders.
So that sounds like an awful lot of work outside of your organization. How do you find free time?
Um, Free time. Well, I guess
Well, I say free time, I mean, how have you had to change the way you operate as a person, going from one level of leadership to the
up
top
to
level of leadership, and now all these newfound responsibilities? I mean, do you actually get to run the university, or do you spend a lot of time with all these stakeholders you just went through?
well, you'll have to remind me what principle this came from, but it was really helpful when you and others have spoke about the principles about being up and out versus
Yep.
down in it, right? And so you really learn that, yes, we have to delegate, but it's about empowering other people to be able to do the work that they need to be able to do. And so I haven't found it to be too difficult to figure out where I want my time spent. I see my life, and I've always operated this way as from faculty member through leadership roles, that my life is very blended. So if there's a service activity happening at Clarkson College, my husband and our daughter and our son are going to be there at that service project, and it's a very blended component for me. If we're going to a fundraiser or there's something that's going on, then I see people on our campus that are wanting to do that's a social time for me. And
Mhm.
so I see my leadership role, I guess, in my life really as a blended component. People talk a lot about work-life balance, and you have to have balance, and I should have probably better hobbies than taking classes all the time. However, I think people have to do what they're passionate about. If there's any call to action in all of this, is that we need people that are passionate about being in the workforce, whatever that workforce role is. And so where we find the time is I'm a night owl and an early bird, and it works. And so I really do spend, for me, 16 to 18 to 20 hours of my day doing the things I love. And the things I love are to make sure that we're serving our communities, that we're developing healthcare professionals, that I'm still getting a chance to, go for a walk in the woods and maybe play a little golf and hang out with the kids when they're home now. But it's more about the blended approach for me. So I don't see, I guess, it as much of a, how am I going to have time to do this?
Well, I think what you've done, and I'll expand on one of your comments about up and out or down and in.
Mhm.
Leaders in your position, you have a tremendous amount of responsibilities that go outside the gates of your institution. Because you're the face, you're the spokesperson, you're the ones that are keeping the alumni happy and the boards, however you're designed, they're happy that you're moving in the right direction. Then you've got contacting the media to tell your story. You've got fundraisers, you've got donors, all of that. Here you are, you're a PT, then you're a VP, and you're all internal. You start at VP, you start doing a little external, but you're all pretty much internal. Then all of a sudden you're thrust into the up and out. That's where your focus is as the representative. And so you have a tremendous ability, from what I've observed, to be an adaptive leader. In North House and some of the other readings, you want to get up on the balcony and look down. And when you look down, you can see, is the college doing what it needs to do, and has everybody got what they need? And you make sure that's going. You put systems in place to take everybody and resource them. Then it gives you a chance to look down the road and see, is there a problem coming? Is there an opportunity coming? And so as long as you get the institution taken care of, you can really get up and out and really do your primary job, which is to bring what the institution needs and to tell the institution's story. What I see, I don't see people as successful at doing that as you in a lot of cases where I work with them, because especially those who have grown up in the organization, they're very comfortable down and in. They really like to do their last job, which made them look really good to get the next job.
Mhm.
And a lot of times people will drag stuff with them. And when I was younger, you probably won't remember Battlestar Galactica, but if you remember, the spaceship's got all the little spaceships following it. That's what people do when they grow up in an organization, is they drag the pieces of their last job they like with them to all the way to the top. Next thing you know, they're not leading anything. They're just doing like 9 jobs.
Right.
People behind them aren't doing it. So how did you avoid that? How did you make that transition? Or was it just as natural for you as it seems like in this process for you to ascend to the top of your organization?
Well, I guess the
And it's okay not to be humble.
okay,
Okay. We're
so
wanting to get people to reflect on what you're
we're,
saying, because you've done it.
yeah, I have done the biggest. Uh, well, for me, failure is really not an option, is how I operate, and so I do want what's best for the organization at the end of the day. I want what's best for our students at the end of the day. I want to, I like being the best. And so there's for, there's your not humble side of that conversation, because what that takes is then the willingness to know that I can't do everything. And so, um, if I would keep all of the academic affairs pieces that I was doing before, or all of the, physical therapy pieces I was doing before, then that's only going to hurt the organization. And so I don't personally want to fail, but I also don't want the organization to fail. And what I also observed during my time here is that the college had fallen into a little bit of complacency. And I think that's where society's really seeing higher education as well just fall into some complacency. And so if you're just comfortable with the status quo, or we've always done this before, or this is what it's worked fine in the past, it'll come around, the pendulum will swing back. That that doesn't work for me. And so uh, yes, we know history repeats itself a little bit, and in academia, items we used before might come back now, such as even motivational interviewing and different things that come back. But that's how I guess I would sum it up, is the fact that you have to leave those bits and pieces behind if you really care about the organization, or you really care about, in my opinion, the people you're serving. Then I'm going to be of best service by making sure that I'm doing the job that I'm now hired to do and what my roles and responsibilities are to do now, not do what's easy for me. Because usually doing what's easy is not usually what's effective.
Yeah, yeah. And then it's a disservice to the person that replaced you because you don't
Mm.
train them how to do it. You don't give them the benefit of your experience for them to do it for the institution. So, and a lot of times it's interesting what you'll find when you go look across an organization. Somebody's taking that with them because it's the thing that got them recognized to get the promotion in the first place. They want to keep that bright, shiny object with them. So I gotta ask you one last question here. I
Sure.
want, because you're obviously very self-aware. Your emotional intelligence is high. But that's from an extrovert asking, complimenting another extrovert. My observations of you and your team is that your personality types are very different.
Mhm.
And it's the kind of organization that you are and the different disciplines that you have within that organization. What are the challenges of you being as extroverted and as outgoing and as personable as you are, when you have others around you that are not as extroverted? They're very smart. They're very inward thinking. They're going to really think something through and analyze it before they provide you information. And knowing how you're designed, you want to move like this, especially at the beginning of this whole tenure as the president. How have you mitigated that? How have you leveraged it? And what have you learned?
Yeah. So um, what I've learned is we need everybody, right? If everybody was the same, then I really worry about groupthink. So I never want to be in a situation with groupthink. And so we need all of those different angles and that expertise. Um, what I've definitely done or tried to do is make sure that, again, people know the why, because when I am fat, I'm going to be quick, right? We're going to be fast in some areas, but I'm very clear of what that time period is. And so when we were first starting, there was quite a few things that needed to be done organizationally, on the campus, et cetera. And I just kept saying in the message, we have, one time to make a first impression. You have one time to make a first impression. It's going to be hectic for these few months, but then we will, have some stability and we'll have some direction. And here's the clear strategic initiatives, but we're going to have to be operating on all cylinders. And then have different timeframes when you can say, yes, these things can go slower if they need to. But what has been the true value added is that the sense of urgency, I'm much more clear on what the sense of urgency is. And so for myself, that's helpful so that everybody around me knows, okay, these are the items that are on, Andrea's top three, if you will, and these are the priorities. And I share those with the campus. This is where we're operating. This is our sense of urgency. And then the other items, then I have enough people around me to say, oh, we need to take another look at that. We need to check those facts a little bit, more deeply, or we need to check these numbers, and I need that balance, because if I just, run off the cliff, then I'm going to take the whole, institute, or feel like I'm going to take the whole institution down with me. And so I've really learned that value of having those different perspectives. And I've also learned to be a little bit more patient, um, because with people that are less extroverted, as you describe, or moving at such a fast pace, I can feel sometimes like, well, are we going to get there? Are we going to get there? What's the feedback? What's happening? Why isn't everybody as excited as I am right now on this? But they're just processing, right? They're just processing. And that processing is making us, even better. And so it definitely is having that balance of what I said before, the strengths of everybody. That collective impact is so much better when we are really supporting the strengths of everyone. And then I think that there's a lot of good professional growth of pushing others as well. So there are some outward facing pieces that people have to do, and then being very clear of who those constituents are that I need you to focus on, whether it's other chief academic officers or other chief financial officers, or groups that people are saying they might not reach out to, but now I can make a connection.
Awesome.
I don't know if
Any closing thoughts that you would like to share with
um,
the audience that we didn't address today?
So closing thoughts, I really want to thank you for this opportunity again to see in me something that I wouldn't see myself, to get on a podcast and talk about myself or leadership in general. I can be my own worst enemy sometime. And I think that what I definitely want people to be aspiring to is that collaboration is where the future is, whether it's in any industry. I've spent time in academia where it can be very, very slow, and people are not necessarily willing to work that collaboratively together because we don't want to lose the research paper, or somebody will take that idea. And throughout my entire career, I have always felt like, yes, we have to protect the intellectual property of certain things, but for the most part, none of us have created this from the beginning, from hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago. And so it has always been more about collaboration, and I see that more in higher education. So I would really encourage everybody to be sharing what they're doing, because it's going to make it better for the whole. And if we continue to be true servant leaders, then I think higher education has a bright future.